Hello guys, I'm out in the lanes and I'm going for a little wander with the dog. I'm not going very far, this is basically just a dog walk. This isn't a hike or anything of that sort of vein. But nevertheless, I'm enjoying it. The weather is cold, there's a cold wind. And there's steely skies and, if you didn't know any better, you could almost believe snow was on the way. But it's not. But I'm just looking down on a field that I've been trying to find a local farm in the area that vanished, and I've been looking in totally the wrong direction. A gentleman that lives in a house just down the road, who incidentally told me the cottages he lives in, or the house he lives in, was two cottages, and they belong to the farm that's now disappeared. Those cottages two workmen lived in, but I'm looking down to where the farm once existed from pretty much the 1800s, pretty much I think to the sort of like the 1950s and 60s when it got demolished. But I'll just let you have a look as far as I can really go from here. Well, looking down across this field, there would have been a hedge, which I've been informed was the reason it was called the Lane Field. But obviously, that hedge has been taken out many years ago. That's because it went actually nowhere once the farm was demolished. And the farm apparently sat down by that dilapidated oak tree on the corner there where you see the hedge just jutting out. And it pretty much overlooked the other farm on the opposite side of the stream. There's a stream that runs down through that little valley or re-entrant there. And there was a farm there, but it's no longer in existence. And I was looking for this farm possibly a good mile away on the opposite end of where this river came. So how wrong can you be? But local knowledge, an old boy, yep, right down there was a farm. But that no longer is the case, and it's lost to history, and it's only really in the local history books that you even knew that it did once exist. If I can, I'm going to show you something that's in the hedges, or you can see it at the moment in the hedges. It won't be long before you won't be able to see it, but it's fundamentally one of the building blocks of the hedges that, are pretty much what makes up the countryside pretty much in the southwest, if not most part of the UK. And it's pretty much been around this practice for 1,000 years, possibly more. But I'll let you have a look. These trees here have been earmarked. They got blue paint there. They've been taken down, and if my memory serves me right, they were ash trees. I'm not 100% sure, but I can remember these trees here down this lane being in existence when I was whizzing around on motorbikes from 16 years of age, because this road used to become extremely slippery, and when you're hurtling along as a group of young lads, you kind of quickly learn to pay attention to things like this. But yeah, they're no more, so there obviously was a reason for them to come down. They're all marked with blue paint, but sadly another memory gone. First snowdrops of the year. All these lanes, you can see evidence that they've recently been flailed. You can see there's a nice clear flat top to this side of the roadside, and all the bits have come off it is lying in the verge. So what I'm going to show you, or attempt as best I can with these hedges, is the practice of hedge laying. Now, what that in effect entails is basically a young sapling tree, predominantly hazel. Other trees will take to it, but hazel is by far the most well recognised tree for this practice. But you basically have what's known as a bill hook, which is kind of like a machete with a hook on the end. They can sometimes have a spike on the opposite end and an inverted blade on the top side of it, but more often than not it was just almost like a machete cross meat cleaver, but it had like a hook on the front bit, and you would slice pretty much 75% of the way through the actual young tree sapling, and then bend it over, trying not to snap the last portion that was left, the last 25%. Now what that does, you will probably think that would kill a tree, but if you leave just enough full of nutrients can come from the root ball back up through that very small sliver of wood, it will keep that tree that's been laid over pretty much alive, and it will shoot and stay in that position. Now this is a practice that's gone on for a long time. I can remember my grandfather doing it, and as a young boy being fascinated with all these tools like the bill hook I've just discussed and that, you know, I used to enjoy going out and watching him do it, and but I was never allowed to do it because I was a young lad, and swinging these bill hooks, you do need to know what you're doing or you could lose a hand or a foot. There, you can see the cut there. The main part has been cut through, it's been bent over, and the last 25% of the existing tree is attached to the root ball running down there, has been bent over perfectly. But it hasn't killed the tree, because if you look up there, you will see all the runners coming out of it, and they're reaching for the sky. But because this goes along the hedge, it reinforces it and makes it stock proof. And this is an early form of hedging. So this tangled mess here, or you might assume, this had obviously been laid over many years ago, and it's been laid over somewhere in amongst there, and you can see it rolling along all the way along there, and you can see all the runners or shoots coming up reaching for the sky. It's got a build up of organic matter, so this basically is now forming into a pretty impenetrable hedge. And you know, this is how things were done a long time ago. This is another good example here, and this is of a relatively new one. And as you can see, it's a complete tree that's been taken over, and I'll see if I can get anywhere closer to where it's been cut. You can just see it's been cut down there, but it's got growth coming out of it now. But as you can see, this is what happens, and it's got all these runners that's grown out of the actual tree itself. It's not dead, it's living, even though the tree has been laid over. And this is how effective it can be. There was a gateway here at some point. You can probably just see it where there would have been one. But this one's been taken over here. It's been cut there, bent over, it's been brought along, and as you can see, it's now forming like it's runners and shoots coming out of there, and you can see it's alive, some real big healthy ones, and that will eventually in time move across, producing more runners, and it would be fully stock proof, and you wouldn't even need barbed wire to keep the stock in the field. And it repairs holes in the hedge by just such this method. Now, as I've said, hazel's prized as a tree species to perform this on, but you know, a lot of other tree species like, you know, ash, that will work quite well with it. Sycamore, oak can, but as you'll see, a lot of trees get left if they don't look like, you know, they will, you know, lay over. Now you can see it's been cut there and bent over, and the top flat piece, the very end, is where it's been cut at an angle. It's just been left there, and you can just see the bend as it goes up into the flat piece going along, or a horizontal piece. But there is one singular tree that's been left there, and that more than likely looked like to the person doing the hedge that it wouldn't have survived, or it wouldn't have adopted the position if it was cut. Now coppicing is totally different altogether. That's where you're cutting the actual young trees or the actual tree itself down to a stump where it can regenerate and do its own thing and reach for the skies. That is a different kind of management. Hedge laying, or laying a hedge, is where the sole purpose is to provide a barrier, a boundary for, you know, whatever purpose, be it, you know, marking property or make something stock proof. But they're two totally separate practices. But ultimately, you are relying on the tree regenerating in both of them. So the idea is to cut them in a sympathetic way to make sure you do not kill the tree. So all these hedges pretty much around where I live, they all have evidence like this of being laid. And everywhere I've walked to along these fields, I've been able to find, like I said, recent and historically old examples of the actual laying process. Now you can see this one here, there's virtually nothing but a slither, and yet again you'd think that would be dead, but if you look through, there are still examples of shoots coming out of it. This has been done a long time because that wood has started to go black. I would say this is possibly 5 years old, and the one above it, but they've been weaved through all the existing trees, stumps and twigs there to hold them down. Now my grandfather used to make stakes, which was basically like a Y piece with a longer bit on one side, and if he had nowhere he could weave it into, he would just hammer the long bit down into the hedge with the shorter piece of the Y, pulling and bearing down on the bit that he had just cut. And in fact that is like a peg to keep it down till it had set in position through growing and taking on that particular position through the next year of the growing season. But yeah, it was a fascinating process, and you know, people still do it to this day, like I say. But you know, it's just something that's been passed, you know, down from father to son, or learnt, you know, from, you know, 1,000 maybe more years of doing this in the countryside. So if you're ever in the countryside and you're just looking at the hedges, just perhaps give it one quick little look, perhaps a bit harder, and see if you can see some new or ancient hedge laying. You know, you can still find trees that are pretty much as thick as your leg around that have grown in that position, and they might do an elbow another metre or 2 metres further away from where they are originally cut. You know, so it's just a fascinating thing to have a look at. The hedge holds a lot of secrets, and it holds a lot of stories, because ultimately most of the people that may have laid these hedges, if you find, you know, well established trees cut over like that, they probably aren't with us anymore. So just, you know, have a little nod when you see the work they've done, because for most of us with our jobs or work or endeavours, they won't last as long as those trees. So anyway, this is Andy from Hidden Valley Footpaths. I'm making my way back home. You know, I just thought I'd show you a little bit of hedge laying. All the best, stay safe, and I hope to catch you out on the trail.